Back in the days of the Soviet Union, the ruling communists had a newspaper they called Pravda, which is the Russian word for truth. The paper's propaganda was about as subtle as its title. Since then, times, political systems, and ideologies have changed. But in 2005, when the Kremlin was getting back into the news business, it created Russia Today, RT, as it's now known. RT is an international news channel set up to rival Western channels and to provide a Russian perspective. The network has since added 2 more channels broadcasting in Spanish and Arabic. RT's English language project is getting mixed reviews. Its criticism of Washington and the ways of the West is relentless, and it has a penchant for some offbeat stories and wacky conspiracy theories. The Listening Post's Anna D'Souza now on a channel that seems more interested in reviving the Cold War than reporting what's really happening in Russia today.
In Washington.
In Estonia. In Germany.
And she's the mother of a race of good aliens here on Earth called Pleiadians.
Was the sign of Satan worshippers, a satanic star.
They sell our dead bodies on a meat market of their own kind that goes passing by here every 50 years.
It's bright, brash, and often controversial, and features an unconventional cast of characters, including British Russophile Peter Laval, whose programme Crosstalk features atypical stories and some eccentric contributors.
They call themselves 9/11 truthers, skeptics, and truth activists.
And then there's Russian-born, American-educated Alyona Minkovsky, the 26-year-old host of The Alyona Show, who's more than happy to pick a fight.
Glenn Beck, that doughboy nut job from Fox News.
This is RT, Russia's English-speaking window on the rest of the world.
What do you think is really going on here?
Certainly in comparison with Russian television, it looks more professional. It's fast, energetic, responsive, more spectacular on the screen, more modern in terms of technological effectiveness and how journalists and presenters usually communicate.
We are suggesting our audience a number of stories that they probably will never see on any of the other television stations, what we call mainstream media.
In December, RT says it was the first Russian channel to start broadcasting on the biggest anti-government protests since the end of the Soviet Union, when it provided the most comprehensive coverage, though the bar on that was set pretty low.
We had a large team out on the street, 30 people, several correspondents, a lot of cameramen. We really tried our best to encapsulate what was going on.
So what? They couldn't not show it, because all the Western channels showed it as well. If BBC shows it, if Euronews shows it, if CNN shows it, where is Russia Today? When there are so many people on the street, I believe it had to show them. In fact, RT's coverage seemed to play down the significance of the protests.
Pro-United Russia rallies, one organised by Nashi.
Focusing heavily on the pro-government demonstrations that appeared in response. Compare that with RT's exhaustive reporting on last year's riots in London.
The events that are coming through seem to be getting from bad to worse.
And the Occupy movement that swept the US.
Now grown into a nationwide rally engulfing a growing number of US cities every day.
We have to give them credit for that. But they have a very outdated ideological perspective on things, on their reporting. Whenever somebody says, okay, people are protesting in Russia, something must be wrong, Russia Today immediately answers, no, look, it's even worse in America.
Police brutality, angry protesters. We've gotten used to seeing this during the Arab Spring, but now New York.
I think one of Russia Today's big strengths is the West is in a mess, there's no doubt about it. They love any sign of protest and systemic weakness in the West is great for them.
The whole of central London around Westminster and the Houses of Parliament has been closed off to traffic.
The core of Russia Today is anti-Westernism. It's a paradox. They're broadcasting to the West. They're trying to portray Russia in good terms to the West, but it's actually the whiff or the stench of anti-Westernism pervades almost everything they do.
America sets itself up as a bastion of democracy and fairness, and yet during the Occupy Wall Street demonstration the police came down incredibly hard and very violently on what was essentially a peaceful demonstration, whereas Russia, doesn't set itself up to preach to the rest of the world about that.
But perhaps that's where RT comes in. Emerging in 2005, around the same time as Iran's Press TV,
Qatar's Al Jazeera English, and France 24, all of which sought to provide English-language news content to the world, but from a very different perspective.
Of course, there's another possible interpretation. In the 1990s, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, journalism briefly flourished in Russia. But under Vladimir Putin, freedom of the press was stifled, as Kremlin-approved oligarchs bought up media outlets one after another. And none of those channels, including RT, is about to bite the hand that feeds them.
You don't see any real reporting about the war in southern Russia and the northern Caucasus, and you don't see anything about the Russian security services. You don't see any speculation about how much money Vladimir Putin has. You need to go somewhere else if you want to learn about what's really going on in Russia.
After a healthy workout, why not drop by for a haircut or a spa procedure?
You get these kind of silly stories about pets that can talk and just ludicrous sort of feel-good stories, while turning a complete blind eye to, I would say, the rather more serious problems such as lack of democracy, rule of law, collapsing infrastructure and the rest of it in Russia itself.
The politics behind RT are encapsulated by the actions of its editor-in-chief, Margarita Simonian, who was just 25 years old when she was appointed.
These most recent protests, I looked at her Twitter feed and she was tweeting about the pro-democracy protesters, "I hope they burn in hell," which is not what you expect from someone who runs a kind of supposedly impartial and fair news service. It's more the kind of thing you expect from an old-fashioned Soviet apparatchik. Margarita Simonian used to be in the Kremlin press pool, running around with President Putin, and it's clear that she has admirers in high places because you don't get given a TV station in your mid-20s unless someone likes you.
The senior ranks of Russia today repay detailed scrutiny. If you look at their background and their associations, it's clear these are people who are very well connected with the ruling regime. In theory, Russia today would claim its independence, and I know some of the journalists there who genuinely think they're working for an independent television channel. It's just they so completely agree with the Kremlin's worldview that they think this is natural.
I don't think that the audience and people in general are so stupid that when they see propaganda they can't tell it from a relevant and an objective source of information.
But as Anna Kachayeva points out, RT's problem might well be a crisis of identity.
Russia today does not really understand what they are, whether they're just an overseas broadcaster or whether they broadcast something globally Russian to the whole world.
We'll continue to do what we do. We think we do it well.
I think RT is emblematic of the failure of the Kremlin really to understand how the West works and how the Western media works. What they've done, it's the way the Kremlin solves most problems, is they just fling money at it. So RT is now everywhere. But it's not really doing them any good, I think, because it's very hard to take this channel seriously.
What's that? We are the mainstream media? No!
More Global Village Voices now on Russia Today.
We should look at RT in a greater context. Its primary objective is to enhance Russia's public diplomacy. To do that, RT has ventured to counter Western media hegemony and cover major news stories from a Russian perspective. So, if we look at the media environment as a field of contestation, RT certainly adds a voice. However, by itself, it cannot be seen as impartial or objective.
Russia Today, as I see it, focused primarily on news from the United States and the West, and it has a pretty clear agenda about how to cover this news. I like the fact that we have an alternative source of information and a different view on what's going on in the West and the United States, but I would also expect that a channel that called Russia Today would provide more information about Russia today.